Das magische Stück Musik, das Sie gerade gehört haben, heißt Pur ti miro im italienischen Original. Das ist gar nicht so leicht übersetzt, aber vielleicht frei übersetzt sowas wie wenn ich dich nur betrachten kann, dass ich dich nur sehen kann. Und das ist der sehr berühmte Schluss jener Oper, um die sich die heutige Matinee der Wiener Staatsoper dreht. Kurz wird sie Poppea genannt, korrekt l'incoronazione di Poppea, also die Krönung der Poppea, geschrieben von Claudio Monteverdi. Gesungen haben das Duett der amerikanische Mezzosopran Kate Lindsey als der römische Kaiser Nero und Slávka Zámečníková, ein Sopran und ein Ensemblemitglied der Wiener Staatsoper. Sie ist die Geliebte des Kaisers, Poppea eben, die in diesem Duett sozusagen am Ziel ihrer Wünsche angelangt ist. Sie wird die nächste Kaiserin sein. Der Preis, den sie dafür zahlt und den alle um sie herum dafür zahlen, das ist die Triebfeder dieser Oper. Dirigiert hat die kleine Aufzeichnung Pablo Heras-Casado, natürlich auch der Dirigent unserer Produktion, die am 22.05. Hier im Haus am Ring Premiere feiern wird und dann noch 4 weitere Male zu sehen sein wird. Denn zu unserer allergrößten Freude dürfen wir ab 19. Mai Publikum wieder im Haus begrüßen. Heute in dieser Matinee sind wieder die Sängerinnen und Sänger der Produktion bei mir, der Regisseur, der Dirigent. Es gibt viele neue Namen zu entdecken, es gibt viel Musik zu hören und es wird auch wieder einen Leitfaden durch die Partitur geben. Das Besondere an diesem Bühnenbild ist, dass es bis in den Orchestergraben hineinreicht. Das Orchester sitzt auch noch höher als hier in Wien ohnehin üblich und die Sänger haben 3 Bereiche, wo sie wirklich mitten im Orchester stehend und sehr nah am Publikum stehend agieren können. Das andere, was an dieser Produktion besonders ist, ist, dass im Graben ausnahmsweise nicht das Orchester der Wiener Staatsoper sitzen wird. Denn diese Musik kann nur gespielt und interpretiert werden von hochspezialisierten Ensembles. Das liegt einerseits an den Instrumenten, die dafür vonnöten sind, und andererseits an der Art und Weise, wie sie notiert ist, wie sie überliefert ist. Sie muss zur Hälfte fast improvisiert werden. Und so wird bei diesen Vorstellungen der Concentus Musicus Wien zum ersten Mal an der Wiener Staatsoper auftreten. Das ist keine kleine Sache, denn der Concentus ist meiner Ansicht nach die wichtigste Orchestergründung des 20. Jahrhunderts weltweit. Und Nikolaus Harnoncourt natürlich war der Gründer 1953. Der Grund dafür, für diese Bedeutung ist, dass dieses Ensemble unter Herrn Harnoncourt die Art und Weise revolutioniert hat, wie wir sogenannte alte Musik, Bach, Händel und älter, heute hören und empfinden. Und von da aus dann auch Musik des 18. und 19. Jahrhunderts. Kein Orchester kann heute und will heute Mozart so spielen, wie es vor einigen Jahrzehnten noch üblich gewesen wäre. Und der Grund dafür liegt in einer Bewegung, die hier in Wien nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg ihren Anfang genommen hat, mit Nikolaus Harnoncourt und dem Concentus. Wieder wollen wir Ihnen einen Leitfaden durch die Partitur geben, also die Schlüsselstellen dieser Musik zeigen. Und das Material dafür ist aus unseren Orchesterproben eben mit dem Concentus hier im Saal genommen. Die Handlung, die diese Partitur musikalisch zum Ausdruck bringt, ist eine sehr einfache Geschichte. Der römische Kaiser Nero, wir sind also so in den 60er Jahren des 1. Jahrhunderts, entledigt sich seiner Frau Ottavia, um seine geliebte Poppea auf den Thron neben sich zu setzen. Mit welcher Brutalität das passiert und mit welcher Ungerührtheit Monteverdi diese Handlung sozusagen mit einem scheinbaren Happy End zu Ende bringt, ist unglaublich zeitgenössisch, unglaublich modern an diesem Werk. Die herrschende Klasse wird als gierig, als skrupellos, als über Leichen gehend gezeigt. Es ist ein erzwungener Selbstmord zu beklagen, ein Mordversuch, mehrere Existenzen werden ruiniert durch Vertreibung und Verbannung. Und die Musik, die dazu erklingt und von der Sie jetzt Beispiele gehört haben, verfremdet das Ganze zusätzlich. Jetzt möchte ich Ihnen den Dirigenten unserer Produktion vorstellen. Auch er ein Hausdebütant, Pablo Heras-Casado. Er ist Spanier, er hat das Privileg, im wunderbaren Granada geboren worden zu sein. Er hat dort Schauspiel und Kunstgeschichte studiert und dann das Dirigieren. Und er ist ungewöhnlich unter den Dirigenten, weil er ein so breites Repertoire abdeckt. Er ist zum einen Spezialist für frühe Musik, zum Beispiel Monteverdi. Andererseits dirigiert er mit den größten Symphonieorchestern der Welt, Bayerischer Rundfunk, Berliner Philharmoniker, Wiener Philharmoniker, auch Repertoire des 19. und vor allem auch des 20. Jahrhunderts. Er war Meisterschüler bei Pierre Boulez und, was für uns sehr wichtig ist, er dirigiert sehr viel Oper. Er ist erster Gastdirigent am Teatro Real in Madrid. Welcome, Pablo.
Thank you very much.
The music we're talking about here has been a passion of yours for many, many years. What makes it so special in the end?
When I discovered Monteverdi's music for me was a huge shock, because I think it was so special because I had been singing mainly 16th century music, polyphony, by those great masters like Tomás Ruiz de Victoria, Francisco Guerrero, then Palestrina, Orlando Vilaso. Then the music by the Venetian composers of the Gabrieli, Andrea Giovanni Gabrieli, but especially Monteverdi, when I discovered that after knowing the tradition of the polyphony, for me it was like discovering rock and roll in a way, because he was a man by his time who absorbed and respected the tradition of the musical writing, the polyphony, but started to go into a different way, to breaking the rules, taking the good from the old times and mixing it together with the new aspects of music, and created a revolutionary style, one of the biggest revolutions in musical history.
Well, let's talk about the rock and roll aspect for a moment. I think, many people who will see this production, who are new to Monteverdi, will find it, I think, like you said, a shockingly modern. It will sound to them almost like pop music from centuries ago, before there was pop music. Why is that? What makes this effect?
I think there are two main aspects on this, even three. His means of expression, Monteverdi, the way he translates deeply human emotions, I see deeply because of the authenticity, is very direct. It's not yet, let's say, put into a sign of stereotype of an opera singer, or it's very direct. It's almost like they are speaking to you, they're talking to you. And this is in a very simple and organic language, like as if they were singing, together with a very improvisatory feeling, so which this music is essential. It's essential that, despite the many rehearsals, the continuo, which is the band who is in this case we have a huge continuo band, all these bass instruments and harpsichords, organ, lute, harp, etc. Also, they improvise and they go together with the mood, with the action, with the affection of the singer, and this made it very real, very real. And also at the same time, it's plenty of it's mixed with a lot of instrumental ritornelli, little instrumental
orchestral
interludes, which are deeply connected with folk music, with dance, with music which directly touches your soul, but also your body. So it was the folk music, the pop music of its time. So he was able to mix the most sophisticated with the music of the streets.
Yes. Now, of course, part of the whole improvisational approach is that there is no printed score as we know it. I mean, the autograph has been lost. There are two main sources, I believe, and sometimes what's written is only like a sketch. So how do the musicians, together with you, arrive at the version we will hear?
That is true, and it's even the sketch, let's say, dimension of this opera. It's even in the structure, sometimes to decide whether to take one scene out or in, or to put together more ritornellis or more interludes or less, some trios. We have to make a version for this moment. And then, as you say, you have only one note and you have to know exactly what to do with that note. If the chord is a bigger one, is a shorter, or is a drier or more expansive. And we have to do that in the course of 3 hours, and working very closely with the text, with the poetry, with the meaning, with the emotional moment. And of course, you have to have a huge experience and knowledge on the style, and knowing exactly how to interpret. And these musicians, they do have it, and I guide them, and they also give back.
Well, the audience will hear a great example of what you were just talking about in the very first chord of the opera. It's a long A minor chord in which the whole orchestra improvises. It's in itself like a little miracle. One more question I had for you is, what's unusual in our production is the size of the orchestra. There is this notion, you and I have been talking about this project for a long time, and we both think it's wrong, that the forces have to be small. And it's a valid opinion, but we decided on the opposite. We use almost 3 times as many players as in other productions. It's 47 musicians, and there's a wonderful, punchy, powerful sound. Can you talk about this choice?
Yeah. Of course, we don't have a recording or a map or a photo of the moment of the premiere of this opera in Venice, but we have lots of information and lots of we can use the instinct, deduction, and information in order to make a good decision. Not even in the theatre, but already in the church music in the times of Monteverdi. Monteverdi had the position of being the Kapellmeister of the Maestro di Cappella in San Marco. Yes. Since many years before, it was usual that in a major festivity, even on Sundays or in major festivities, in the, let's say, the ensemble they had, the fixed ensemble they had in San Marco, which was pretty big already, they would add as many instruments they could, or they could pay, in order to make it richer, bigger, and in order to have different ensembles in one. They invented this huge, rich polyphony of polychoral effect in Venice when they had 2 different galleries of organs, and they wanted to make this theatrical colors, aspects in the music.
Also, we know that the theater that it was premiered in actually was a large theater.
Exactly, no? Precisely. It was a big theater. It was not an intimate palace like in a nobleman, but it was a big theater. It was a theater with a big stage, a theater who could seat about 900 people. Which I'm sure at the moment were not as silent as today when people come to the Staatsoper before the first court start. They were not as silent. So it was an entertainment. And people from the street, a gondoliere or whoever could go buy a ticket and go there. So it was an entertainment as well. And
the orchestra had to be big.
The orchestra had to be big because they had at hand all these amazing musicians in the city that we know that were used. They used the salterio, they used the harp, they used the bassoons, they used the double bass, and for carnival season, for an event like opera, a famous composer like Monteverdi was for sure they used all this.
Pablo wird Sie jetzt durch die Partitur führen, so wie wir das schon gemacht haben beim Parsifal oder beim Faust, und wird Ihnen sozusagen die Schlüsselstellen aus seiner Sicht erklären.
With this ensemble, in this repertoire, we are talking about a period instrument ensemble. So all those instruments are sometimes original instruments coming from the period, from the 17th century. Most of the times they are copies by the models, existing models of those years. And then there's a lot of documents, lots of information about how they were built. But of course, another very interesting question is that one, the diapason, so the tuning. This is a very interesting and very large question, and it would, at that moment, it would vary depending on the geographical zone. Even inside the same country, from the north to south, would come the habitude and the tradition. In this case, we've chosen to tune in the A in 440 Hertz, which is more or less similar to the tuning we have today, the international diapason. Today, the tendency is to do 442, 443, but 440, it was a usual diapason on those on that time. So here for Poppea, as it was already a tradition in the very young history of the opera that Monteverdi was himself, he established. In Venice, at the moment when the public opera opened, was the very historical moment. Not only because of having a little introduction, but it was a scenic theatrical effect, a very important one, to open the show, also to make people, to alert people and to grab people's attention, to start with a sinfonia. Which is what today we commonly call the overture of an opera. So in this case, Poppea has a sinfonia, which means an independent piece, and then we can talk later about the difference between sinfonia and ritornello, which are the two main instrumental pieces in this case. So a sinfonia, it's a piece that is not related to any aria afterwards, not related to any poetic form, but a way of opening a new part of the show, or in this case, opening the full opera. This sinfonia has, which later was established, so this is one of the many aspects in which Monteverdi was a pioneer, because this is the traditional later Baroque overture of a slow introduction and then a fast moment, and this will develop later in the symphony as we know now. So Monteverdi already established this solemn, slow introduction with big sound, big chords. Even there is a very, very first bar, which is only one chord. A one chord which is a kind of big statement, one chord, fermata, silence, and now we stop. But then the second part is a fast dance, like in a triple rhythm, which drives this overture into the agitated prologue. In this case, in the opera, after the Sinfonia, we have a prologue, like in Orfeo. Orfeo is a much earlier opera. It's about 20 years before Poppea, and there is a prologue that helps to, let's say, help to contextualize things that will happen later. In this case, after the Sinfonia, which is the overture, there is a prologue in which three gods, in this case it's fortune, so it is the representation of fortune, virtue, and amore, are fighting amongst themselves to see who is the most powerful, the most important to the humans, and it's very dynamic. It's also funny because it portrays these celestial figures and these gods with quite vulgar attitude, even the language, and they are jealous to each other. They fight. They insult each other. So it's rather low class, let's say, portray of this mythological figures. Until amor comes, is the figure of love, comes and proclaims that whatever you say, whatever you fight for, love will always win. And amore, love, has a couple of appearances later in the full opera, but it's mainly an opera about human characters. It's the first time that in history an opera talks about real stories, something that really happened. It's a historical event. It's Nero. It's Poppea. It's Ottavia Ottone. So it's in the Roman Empire. So it's the first time that real human people is portrayed, and servants and the godmothers and soldiers, etc., into an opera. So this is, as I said, a historical event, but also it's the ground of a new way of writing opera, a new way of portraying all the human emotions, feelings, psychologies, the different kinds of high and very low moral behavior, etc., etc. So the corruption and nobleness in the figure of Seneca, for instance, the philosopher.
Ringrazia la fortuna che con I colpi suoi.
So it's very interesting, this prologue in relation to what will happen later in the Act 1 when the real action starts. Monteverdi, at this age, he's about his 71 years old, at this stage of his career, being an old man, but I'm sure still very powerful and passionate. He had experienced with an expanded, he himself expanded the musical language to limits that nobody could imagine 40 years before he existed. I mean, he started to write music. So this is like the peak of all kinds of possible, let's say, of all kinds of possibilities in portraying emotions, portraying feelings, portraying even physical pain, physical relaxation, etc. His main battlefield, to talk in one way, was the madrigal. So his 8 books of madrigals, plus the posthumous one, the number 9, was for him, for his own literature, the place, his natural form, where he experimented and he found all the different means of expression, and well, he expanded his rhythmic, harmonic, his texture language, the melodic language, when he also combined the human voice and the singing, writing with instrumental. He slowly introduced into his madrigals some instruments, some obbligato instruments. When we arrive to the 8th book of madrigals, it's a book with, it's not only for the voice, for madrigals, but for a full ensemble. So this is the biggest catalog ever that's for all kinds of emotions put into music. In Poppea, he uses all that. Plus, also he extended and expanded all that knowledge, all that experimentation, also in sacred music, into sacred music. And at that moment of history is a very interesting one, because it's the first time that the composer has at hand not just the music of his time, but there is a consciousness of the music of the past, stile antico, old style. So it's basically the style attached to sacred music, to counterpoint, to a way of writing in 3, 4, 5 voices and like polyphonic style. In opposition to a style that's like the monodic style, the one voice accompanied by a bass line, which was more suitable for expressing real human emotions. So he combines and mixes them in a way that he's able in this opera to, in the same sentence, to mix between stile antico and stile nuovo, so let's say an old-fashioned but severe style that it was useful to express some restrictions or some emotions of calmness or hesitation, and then suddenly jumps into a completely different style, rhythmically, but also harmonically. He uses and he destroys all kind of, harmonic rules that existed, very strict rules, counterpoint harmonic rules that in the early 17th century composers were experimenting by, but not following them, by breaking all those rules in terms of dissonances, in the sequence of chords that have nothing to do with each other. It was C major. I remember now that, for instance, Ottavia, at the end of the scene, a scene when Ottavia is giving up in his, his love for Nerone, and then suddenly Seneca comes into the stage, and you go from an E minor to a C minor, which is a lot of colliding notes. It's a completely different space. He does that continuously and taking us without any kind of transition from one harmonic region. One harmonic region is also attached to one emotion, and then suddenly taking you to a different space within a second, without transition. This is one of the many aspects we could quote, but also he starts also experimenting and making fun with roles like damigella or valletto, this kind of young characters who are like a little small analogy to the main character. So they depict this lover's relation in a smaller scale, let's say, and this allows him to have a more buffo aspect, a more funny scene. And this damigella balletto, for instance. He experiments in order to show desire and to show less a physical desire for a young lady to a young man, lots of rhythmical, and to show how you side, so called your sospiro, so rhythmical interruptions. When also Valletto is making fun of Seneca, because this little boy saying that Seneca is bullshit, and he always, whatever he does, he thinks he's very intelligent. He thinks he's the right person. He always thinks that every single word will be, has to be respected. And then Valletto is the young generation who is forgetting about these old philosophers, these old moral, ethical aspects, and is making fun of him. Even if when he yawns, or when he sneezes, or when he is laughing, Seneca thinks he's saying something very interesting. So Valletto is just making fun and making a caricature, a grotesque caricature. And then you see clearly that Monteverdi is having fun of that. He's having fun, and it's just taking out of his huge catalog of effects, let's say, also at that level, just to entertain people in the theater. You can see that Monteverdi it's also creating a little entertainment scene. Mainly the minor key, it's connected not only with sadness necessarily, but nostalgia, longing. Here, the most beautiful and sensual and sometimes openly sexual scenes between Poppea and Nerone, but also Nerone and Lucano, his young lover, the young poet, are written in minor. Also in minor key. You never feel this is something sad, but on the contrary, it's sensual. I think it's later that there was the minor key is connected with some let's say more sad aspects. In this moment of history of music and the history of opera, categories hasn't been let's say or typologies hasn't been already established. There's not a typology for a moment of joy, of love, and things interact and evolve in a very, very fluid way. In a way like from the very beginning you have a recitativo style, like in 3 bars, and then suddenly this becomes into a little arietta that lasts for 4 seconds, and then suddenly it's a stile antico sentence to make some kind of big statement, and then goes into a ritornello, and then comes another arioso, and it was much more spontaneous, yet very, very well structured, of course, than it became later in the Baroque. In each act has a number of different scenes after the Sinfonia and then the prologue. Then the first act starts with another not with a sinfonia, but with a ritornello, because this will be part of ritornello. It's a short instrumental piece which acts like a little instrumental music after another stanza. So basically it's an aria with a few verses, and then ritornello. Ritornello, it means because it returns. It's a music that returns maybe one more time or three more times, and helps to articulate the poem into the different stanzas, and to give the whole scene or the whole aria some more color and some more impulse. Sometimes there is a ritornello that acts as a way of structuring this aria. Sometimes there are little arias with no need of ritornello, and Monteverdi writes aria on it, and lasts for 8 bars, 12 bars, and goes but without any. Sometimes without not a very clear distinction between the aria and the ritornello, but just evolves and gets transformed into a recitativo. And sometimes inside the recitativo you see that there is a bass line which asks for a more regular pace of the words, and then another aria comes. So there is not a fixed plan like later in Baroque you have in Baroque music, Handel operas, in which you will have an aria with A, B, A, and then recitativo, and then eventually a duet. In this case, everything is completely much more dynamic and organic. And there is another interesting aspect, which very connected to this, is the way Monteverdi expresses the natural rhetoric, the natural speaking, or the natural declamation of the poem, how he expresses this into musical values, into rhythmical values. And many times it's still been, let's say, considered that a recitativo can be just, more or less rubato, and you can take these rhythms in a very free way. This is something that later, in 18th century, recitativos, the rhythmic values of a recitativo into music is expressed more freely, and it's given the full, like in Mozart recitativos or bel canto recitativos, it's left to the singer to speak. But Monteverdi has a very clear idea to how he translates in a wonderful way the poetic cadence of the verse into music. If you really respect these values, there is always an inner pulse that drives the whole scene and can be translated into a beautiful way of singing and respecting every strong and every soft part of the word, but also of the whole verse. And it's really wonderful to see how he masters the poetic rhythm of the declamation. So most of the times he's right when he asks for a longer syllable and a shorter one, or he really suddenly transforms everything into double speed. He knows how to write it. So it's fascinating.
Penetrato di Nerone gli amori, onde temo e pavento, ogni giorno, ogni punto, si edica vita, il giorno al punto estremo.
There's nothing at all. In this score, nothing is written, only one note in the bass line, one note for the singer. When there is a ritornello for the instruments, there's 2 lines for the violins, occasionally one line for the viola, and that's it. Even for the harmonic, for the accompaniment, when you have the basso continuo, which is the bass line that is accompanying the melody, the singing line, the basso continuo has some numbers and ciphers that gives you the idea of this chord has a minor third, a major third, has a seventh, or some. And there is very, very little information. So means that a full opera made basically of two lines, two melodic lines, a bass line and a melodic line on top, has to be absolutely built. You have to build the whole, organic construction with experience and knowledge of the style, and then of course the tempo will be found out by the character, by the mood of the scene, by the emotional, psychological content, but of course there are, depending on the staging, depending on the emotional moment, there are many ways of doing it. You can, depending on the singer, depending on the stage director's vision. I can think of any tragedy or comedy by Shakespeare, by Lope de Vega, by Cervantes. There are many ways of saying or staging one play with full respect to the text and with full knowledge. So here is the same. There is a lot of freedom. Having said that, bass line, in this case, we have a bass line with only one note, and one note after one note. But if this note is played by a harpsichord alone, or is played a harpsichord plus a violoncello, that could be also played by a double bass, and also viola da gamba, and a lute, and a salterio, and a teorbo, and harp, and even two harpsichords. So we have now, in this case, for instance, in playing this bass line, 13 instruments. It's 13 instruments for just one line. It doesn't mean that they are playing all the time. Means that, in my opinion, in Venice, in a big theater, big public theater, in the carnival season, in a theater that was certainly big and noisy, with almost 1,000 people, you couldn't play many scenes with just a harpsichord and a cello. And we know, of course, because there are historical, there's a lot of studies and books and performance examples by the time, that depending on the mood, the emotion, the scene, the color you want to put to the voice, very quickly, this combination of instruments very, very quickly is exchange. So passing from a couple of chords with the harp and the salterio, and then suddenly putting a double bass together with the organ. And so in more than 3 hours of opera, you have to make a continuous decision on each word of each sentence, each scene, of how to combine, how to make as many colors as possible. And this also reflects a culture in Venice in the middle of the 17th century of the visual ornament, the visual richness everywhere, inside a church, in the clothes, in the streets, in every single building, was something that people would live with. So music certainly also reflected this taste for the ornament, for the contrast, for the texture, for the choral, for the invention, from the mixing instruments from Byzantine tradition together with church instruments. So this applies to the ritornelli, this applies to all the aspects of this opera, and this is why in this production we have the luxury of having, within Concentus Musicus, to have a very rich orchestra to build and to show all the richness and all the possible aspects and combinations of colors that were available in that time.
Ganz am Anfang haben Sie das Duett Miro gehört, berühmt geworden eben als so etwas wie das erste große Liebesduett der Operngeschichte, uraufgeführt 1643, kurz vor Monteverdis Tod. Und es ist sowas wie pure, schmelzende Schönheit am Ende einer unglaublich brutalen Geschichte. Die Grundlage dieser Geschichte sind nicht mythologische Stoffe, so wie es üblich war, sondern reale oder zumindest historisch überlieferte Handlungen. Und das war damals sensationell und ist es lange geblieben. Die Triebfeder der Handlung ist die Macht und die Hemmungslosigkeit des Kaisers Nero. Monteverdis zeitgenössisches Publikum wusste über dieses Leben noch wesentlich mehr, als man vielleicht heute voraussetzen kann. Es war klar, dass er seine eigene Mutter, Agrippina, töten ließ, dass er seine Ehefrau Ottavia nicht nur verbannen hat lassen, sondern auch in der Verbannung ebenfalls töten ließ. Es war bekannt, dass er, während er noch mit Poppea, seiner nächsten Frau, verheiratet war, also zu ihren Lebzeiten, als Braut während der Saturnalien einen befreiten Sklaven sich vermählen ließ. Es war auch bekannt, dass er nach Poppeas Tod sich einen Knaben zur Braut nahm, der dafür vorher kastriert wurde. Und man wusste auch von Poppeas Ende. Die Geschichtswissenschaft ist da heute wohl skeptischer, aber über viele Jahrhunderte wurde angenommen, dass Nero die schwangere Poppea durch einen Fußtritt getötet hatte. Er selbst ist ja dann mit wenig mehr als 30 Jahren zugrunde gegangen. Die Oper klammert das aus, dieses Ende aus. Sie endet mit den Liebesbeteuerungen, die Sie am Anfang gehört haben. Meine Liebe, mein Leben, meine Hoffnung, Idol mio, singt sogar Poppea. Und trotzdem, wenn man weiß, wie die Geschichte, die an dem Punkt stehen bleibt, weitergeht, rückt sie doch auch das Gehörte in ein vollkommen anderes Licht. Von Monteverdi sind 3 Opern erhalten. Poppea, Ulisse und Orfeo, sie werden alle 3, beginnend eben dieses Jahr, hier in der Staatsoper zu sehen sein. Und diese 3 Opern, von angeblich 18 insgesamt geschriebenen, aber nur diese 3 sind erhalten, sind sowas wie der Beginn aller Oper. Das ist ein einzigartiger Vorgang in der Kulturgeschichte. Sowas wie ein produktives Missverständnis. Ein gelehrter Zirkel in Florenz um 1600 macht sich Gedanken um die Rekonstruktion des antiken Dramas und entdeckt sozusagen durch ein Missverständnis unabsichtlich die Oper. Darum ist die Staatsoper übrigens architektonisch ein Werk des Historismus mit so vielen Anklängen an den Stil der Renaissance versehen. Man wollte, dass die äußere Hülle an die Entstehung der Kunstgattung erinnert, die im Gebäude geboten wird. Diese junge Kunstgattung hat jedenfalls in Monteverdi sehr früh einen ihrer bis heute größten Meister gefunden. Monteverdi war auch sehr früh wichtig für das Musikleben in Wien. Er war schon vor 1600 hier in der Stadt, das ist bezeugt, mit einem Fürsten der Gonzaga, natürlich einem Habsburger, dessen Hofkapellmeister er war. Es gab auch später noch Beziehungen. Er hat Ferdinand bei seiner Krönung oder zu seiner Krönung ein Buch seiner Madrigale gewidmet. Aber doch wurde diese Musik nicht nur hier, sondern außerhalb Italiens vielleicht überall, sehr früh wieder wirklich tief verschüttet. Schon Ende des 17. Jahrhunderts wusste man nicht mehr viel davon. Und es hat fast 200 Jahre gedauert, bis sich das geändert hat. Das begann sehr langsam, auch in Wien, mit kleinen, mühsamen Schritten. Man wusste nichts über die Epoche, man war am Beginn der Forschung. Erst nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg kam der große Durchbruch. Und eben Nikolaus Hanunkur und der Concentus Musicus, unser Orchester, waren daran entscheidend beteiligt. Von den 3 Werken, die ich genannt habe, ist nur eines hier am Haus je erklungen. Und zwar 1963, die Poppea selbst und der Karajan, der neugierig genug war, um auch diese Musik hier zeigen zu wollen. 20 Mal gespielt, angeblich sehr erfolgreich, aber in einer sehr, sehr freien Bearbeitung für modernes Orchester und anderen Eingriffen mehr, die von der damaligen Presse nicht wohlwollend aufgenommen wurden. Aber bevor wir jetzt mit dem Regisseur über das Werk sprechen, möchte ich Ihnen einen weiteren Sänger unserer Besetzung vorstellen. Und zwar den Darsteller des Ottone, den katalanischen Countertenor Xavier Sabata. Er ist einer der gesuchtesten Sänger seines Fachs, und zwar auch für zeitgenössische Musik, tritt an allen großen Opernhäusern auf. Und er hat hier die undankbarste Rolle zu verkörpern. Ottone liebt Poppea, aber er ist nun mal kein Kaiser. Und die ganz nach oben strebende Poppea schiebt ihn recht unsanft zur Seite. Dann versucht ihn auch noch die Kaiserin Ottavia zum Instrument ihrer Rache an ihrer erfolgreichen Rivalin zu machen. Es ist das Hausdebüt von Herrn Sabata und er stellt sich nun bei Ihnen vor mit einem ganz obskuren Musikstück von einem der geheimnisvollsten Komponisten der Musikgeschichte, Giovanni Maria Ruggeri. Auch er, man weiß fast nichts über sein Leben, war in Venedig aktiv, ein Jahrhundert nach Monteverdi, und hat eine Oper geschrieben, die verschollen ist, über Torquato Tassos Zauberin Armida. Und aus der ist diese Arie, die Herr Sabata im British Museum selbst bei Nachforschungen gefunden hat. Und die hören Sie jetzt von ihm am Cembalo begleitet von Reinhard Führer. Mein nächster Gast ist kein Unbekannter in Wien, vor allem am Burgtheater, wo er über Jahre sehr große Projekte gemacht hat. Er hat sogar das Goldene Ehrenzeichen für Verdienste um die Republik Österreich. Und er debütiert mit dieser Produktion hier im Haus. Jan Lauwers.
Hallo.
Jan hat Malerei studiert eigentlich. Er ist auch bis heute ein wichtiger bildender Künstler. Er hat zum Beispiel die Gondel Löwen der Biennale in Venedig. Aber er hat schon sehr früh, vor über 40 Jahren, eine Theaterkompanie gegründet. Und die Kompanie hat bis heute eine, sie heißt Need Company, was eine Anspielung ist auf seine Art, über Zusammenarbeit zu denken. Es kommt von I Need Company. Wir werden auch darüber reden. Und er hat nun mit Poppea seine erste Oper inszeniert, in dieser Koproduktion zwischen den Salzburger Festspielen und der Wiener Staatsoper. So Jan, this opera I think was the first. I mean, it was towards the beginning of the genre anyway, but it was the first to use historical figures. It's real life drama. We enter a world of power, of abuse of power. Violence to me seems present in every single second. Is that for you something that makes it especially contemporary, or are we deluding ourselves?
No, the contemporary aspect of Monteverdi is the freedom he creates as a composer. Because he doesn't write all the notes. I don't know if the public knows that, but every musician can play differently every night. Yeah. That was, for me, my attraction to Monteverdi is that in the 17th century, he said already, art is about freedom. And that's also my aim already for 40 years. When I say I need company, it's because it is not possible as an artist to work alone in the living arts. You work together. It's about this being together. And today with Corona, it's already very difficult to be together. And with Monteverdi, you come together with this incredibly strong music where every musician, every singer, but also every dancer on stage has to dare to be creative and produce every night. It is possible when you work together. When I'm there to make them work together. Yeah.
I heard you say in one of the rehearsals that you wanted every single night to be different. I understand where you're coming from, but is it possible in such a highly complex production?
Well, with Pablo it's possible, because also Pablo, he follows the singers and the singers follow Pablo and they dance together around this music. And when I saw the music rehearsal, because I had the same feeling, like how can you do that with 45 musicians to create this atmosphere of freedom? And it works. It works because Pablo is incredibly, yeah, of course he's a good musician, but he's incredibly creative. He reacts very quick. And with a little gesture of his hands, he says to the organ, a bit softer, you can be more, you know. You see that it works in this production mentality because it's important. Theater is often too much in a reproduction mode. And with Monteverdi, it fits with my work, with Need Company. We always talk about production and not reproduction. We come from the performance art, and performance is about not reproducing, and acting is about reproducing. And we try to mix that. And Monteverdi knew all this already in the 17th century.
Now, coming back to the drama itself. A moment ago with the singers, I spoke about Monteverdi's biggest contemporary, which of course I think was Shakespeare. And there is a similarity. There's no moralizing. There is no explaining why somebody, there's no finger pointing.
Yes.
The characters who are evil, and almost everybody is, at least partially, simply are evil and act out. Yes. Isn't that also an incredibly modern aspect of it? Compare that to 1950s movies and sugary endings and moralizing endings.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is Shakespeare, Monteverdi. I'm now also working on a bigger Shakespeare project because of those two people and a few of their colleagues. They were the first global thinkers. I mean, when Shakespeare wrote about, when he wrote Hamlet, it's about Denmark. He was never in Denmark. He didn't care. I can write about Denmark. I can write about Venice from my little office in London. That's no problem. Today, you cannot do that. We talk about identity. We talk about you are black, you're white, you're gay, and everything is labeled. And they said, we don't label. But what was the genius of Monteverdi? He says, okay, I give a contratenor a voice against the soprano, and he knew that the women can be more powerful than a contratenor, and that's what you feel. You feel the gender discussion on stage because of the use of the voices, because of the choices he made, and these radical choices are in fact political choices, and the violence that comes with it is of all times. I think today we have to go back to history to understand more what happens today. On all levels, political level, virus, pandemic, in Shakespeare, same time, all the theatres were closed, and he wrote Julius Caesar. You know, they went on, we go on, you know, and there's a similarity. And so after making 40 years theatre, so I never did opera because I thought that's for later, I don't know, it's not my thing. And now I feel like, okay, I have now a bit more knowledge about what living arts means. Maybe I can serve Monteverdi a bit. That's the reason why I do it, because it's too holy for me somehow to just destroy, deconstruct it, like postmodernism always deconstruct everything. It's very iconoclastic, and I think you should not be with Monteverdi iconoclastic. You should work together to try to create this vicious beauty that is behind this beautiful music.
You mentioned the gender debate kind of playing out. Is that connected to your decision to have Nero sung by a woman? Of course, you know, in many productions...
It's not such a woman. It's Kate. I mean, wow, what a pleasure to work with her.
Kate Lindsey, yeah.
Kate Lindsey is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And so when we asked her, would you do it? And she said, yeah, of course. And she is such a free spirit. She is a bulldozer. She takes every other singer with and say, you have to dare do that. It's fun. Let's have fun. And so, yeah, you can do it with countertenor, fantastic. But Kate gave something for me. I learned from Kate that singers can do a lot when they are not afraid, you know. And I must say the group of people that will sing Monteverdi here is a very strong group, with Xavier and all the others. I mean, they are all an incredible... Also the voice of Kate together with the voice of Slávka, how they work together, that's amazing. That's unique, I think.
At the beginning of the work, there is, of course, this battle between love, virtue, and fortune. And love wins and declares its supremacy. And one could say, and says to the audience, basically at the end of this work, you will see that I was right. And one could say, it's true. The love between Nero and Poppea pushes everything else aside. But what kind of love is it in the end?
Yeah.
What does Nero want from her? And I think it's easier to say what she wants from him.
We should now ask Pablo or a composer to write one more song, one more thing after the beautiful ending. Because what happens after that beautiful ending, Monteverdi stops writing, but historically Nero goes home, Poppea is pregnant, and he kicks her in the belly, and she dies. That is what is happening historically. And
the audience, the contemporary audience, knew that was the case.
Yeah. And so you can add one more scene after this beautiful duet, and then on horror scenes, like this is the reality, people. Yeah. So what is love here? It's a big question mark. The violence in this opera is the violence that you see in Netflix series like House of Cards, or you see with Quentin Tarantino. This is what Monteverdi did. It's very brutal, and it's very difficult to introduce this brutality with this incredibly beautiful music, and that makes it strong because it's ambiguous, and it doesn't give you an answer. So to answer is love winning, there's no answer.
Yes.
He leaves it open. It's up to you, you know.
There's also the element, I mean, the violence in the piece is also somehow always the possibility of violence present on stage. And I think one of the reasons is the use of the dancers.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? I've never seen dancers used in this way in an opera, in this intensity. Also the central element, the turntable, you could call it.
We call it a historical time. In the middle there's a person turning
for the duration of the show.
Yeah, and it's the historical time.
Yes.
We looked for dancers who understood that they had to go to the extremity of their bodies, And I said to them, look, what the singers do, they have to look for the extremity of their voices, you have to look for the extremity of the bodies, and you do that while you listen very carefully to the singers. And that's how we started to rehearse, and they understood it. And so everybody on stage tells the story. And that's the connection. They all do Monteverdi, you know.
How much of it is improvised? I mean, just looking at the rehearsals, there's a lot of action going on. They run to the dancers run to the forefront of the stage. They fall down. They get carried out. How do you shape that?
Well, let's say that we know when point A starts and where point B has to be, but how to go from A to B, the timing has to be right. But how to go there? You can go there with a triple salto, or you can walk. You know, and you decide by listening. And so we created some duets, we created some, but almost no unisonos or whatever. That's like a corps de ballet has to be completely strictly right. I say, I don't want to. I want to have individual people on stage, and they look at you. And so what I do is, in fact, in my work, most of the time, is create portraits of everybody. Mm-hmm. That's why I put also the orchestra, who's phenomenal, I must say. The orchestra is a bit higher up, you can see them. And you can watch the musicians, you can watch the singers, you can watch the dancers. There's always a source of energy that can be followed by... So everybody in the audience can also decide where to look, because there are always different sources of energy at the same time. And that makes it less demagogic, because everybody in the audience can also make up his own story.
Wir können an der Stelle auch einen kleinen Ausschnitt aus der Probenarbeit zeigen, um sich das, was Jan Lauwers hier gerade schildert, besser vorstellen zu können.
Intention today is that we go through it step by step. So sometimes you have to sing it 2 or 3 times. Maybe sometimes you just need to sing it once. So for the singers, you don't have to sing full all the time. Only when Pablo wants you. Hi, Pablo. Sorry, I didn't say hello yet. We have the time, and it's going to be beautiful, I think. We worked very, very good with the music for 2 days. The dancers are super prepared, so the orchestra is phenomenal, people. If they sing more through their face, maybe if they use it as their puppets to sing, maybe it's good, huh? Holding the heads. Okay, wait, sorry. Sing as if the hat is, you have a puppet, and you sing through this puppet. Instead of looking at her, you look with your puppet at her, or you look with your puppet to Pablo, or to the public, and the puppet is in fact your tool. I think this could be really funny also. Very good, very good. If you hold the 2 hats, maybe you come put them almost put the faces of the 2 that you sing with them, and there is really a problem with this Gotze. She's angry, she's arrogant, and guys, stay active. Stay active. I know it's very heavy with your shoulders, you know. I know we don't have to do it too long, because... but don't forget your mouth. Don't forget... Move your head more. Yes. Good. Yeah, good.
One final question about the stage design. It's a completely open stage. It's like a magical space surrounded by blackness, and it was also designed by you. And the floor is this ocean of human bodies.
Yes.
It's somewhere between a graveyard and an orgy.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
So we looked for all the paintings between 1550 and 1650. The time of Monteverdi, a bit later also until the end of 17th century, the portraits of male and female portraits who are naked. There's a lot of nakedness in that time. Yeah. We print them on the floor. You see all these different, from Rubens to Caravaggio. So the Baroque painters, the Renaissance painters are there. And so
it's a pastiche taken from real
yes, and they walk on these paintings, they walk on these bodies, and the dancers are one with the carpet sometimes. So it's like one big Baroque painting that we make together.
Thank you, Jan. I think the audience will be very surprised by this work, not just musically. It was performed here as the only Monteverdi opera once, under Karajan of all people, who was curious enough to want to show it. But what I know from contemporary reports, in a much different way. And I think it will be a big discovery for this house.
I hope so.
Thank you.
I'm very excited.
Im absoluten Zentrum dieses Werkes stehen 3 Frauen. Und die sind jetzt alle 3 bei mir und ich will sie vorstellen. Kate Lindsey singt den Kaiser Nero. Welcome, Kate. Christina Bock ist die Kaiserin Ottavia. Und Slávka Zámečníková, ihre Widersacherin, wenn man so will, Poppea, die Geliebte des Kaisers. So Kate, if I can start with you, the character you portray must be one of the, if historians are to be believed, of the worst human beings ever to walk the earth. How does it feel to be someone like that for 3 hours? Could be fun, no?
Maybe a little bit liberating. You can access your dark side to the extreme. I find him sort of an interesting character. I think we all have elements. I think we all have these dark elements within us, and I think it's been interesting for me to look at, especially for Nero, someone who didn't necessarily seek power. His mother sought power on his behalf.
And was rewarded by him, of course, by getting offed.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Exactly. Yeah. And she wanted him in this position so that she could have power. That was her only way to have power. And so he didn't really ask for it. And then all of a sudden he's given this just a complete free reign. And I don't think necessarily right in the beginning he was as bad as he eventually got. But it's been an interesting exploration. It's made me really think about what power without limits, what that does to a person. When you have no one that will tell you no.
And somebody who tells you no, like Seneca, is another casualty.
Exactly.
But is there a saving grace in him? I mean, would it be bearable to play him? Would we be even interested in seeing him portrayed if there weren't?
I think, oftentimes, if we sort of look at our own lives, there are things that we see and we think it's despicable, and yet we keep looking at it. Yeah. Or there's behavior that we see and we think it's horrible, but we still have to look at it. And I think it's our way within humanity to sort of figure out, well, what is good, or what does good look like to me? Where do I want to be within that? I hope people do have strong reactions. If they hate it or if they love it, the whole purpose of it is to have a strong reaction to what you're seeing.
Is he some kind of Trump precursor in that the narcissism is the main driving force? I mean, what is his love for Poppea ultimately worth? Or is it pure love of self, or is it something else?
Oh, I think love between Nero and Poppea, it's transactional. I don't think he ever understood or has a chance to understand what love is. He's set up to be married to Ottavia. It's all transactional. It's all based on your ranking in society. So I don't think he even knows what that concept could be.
Slávka, Poppea isn't much better, one could say. She is incredibly ambitious. At the end of the opera, she arrives at her goal, which will cost her life. She's a social climber. So you're not portraying a good person, to put it simply, either.
Yeah, it was actually what I was very busy with last days, last weeks, or even last months, I have to say. Because to play something which you don't really like, I was very busy about how I see Poppea, at least. Like, is she good? Is she bad? What is her intention? Is she really in love with him? Is she even able to love someone, or is it only the ambition? Because as I was checking some historical facts yesterday, we talked about that. She wasn't even into him that much as he was into her. He was really like obsessed by her. He really wanted her, and she even laughed him out. She was like, okay, look at your wife, your emperor, and look at who you married and stuff. So she was really like, she was kind of seducer, and she knew that. And this is what I also tried to like put into my interpretation. But I had to be really careful to not make her kind of prostitute, I would say. So it's really tricky for me also to find out what I really want to show, what sides of her I want to show, and I hope I came to a good conclusion. Let's see.
Christina, the Empress Ottavia, of course, starts out as, shall we say, the injured party, but then also she finds her way to the dark side. She concocts this plot to have Poppea killed. She wants to make Ottone her instrument. So again, not a pure person by any stretch of the imagination, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really strong and really long emotional journey for Ottavia and this whole piece. I mean, she starts and she's really tortured by Nero, by his way, how he treats her, and then she really decides, with the help of Nutrice, she decides, okay, I have to do something, and then she became the idea. And I think in this scene between Ottone and Ottavia, this is such a strong scene because you can really see through her, and it's really all these strong emotions that she has, and not the posture, you know, like the formal lady she is normally. Yeah. And then at the end, of course, at Dio Roma, I mean, it's even for me personally, it's a really strange, a strong and also a strange way to end this opera, because the historical figure, she gets killed.
Yes, she wasn't just banned, but she also had to,
she goes to exile, and Poppea really make it happen. So this is not the end of her journey, and this is always in this opera really interesting for me, that there's only this goodbye, but you know, at the end.
Well, the very end is a prime example, of course. Yeah. We listen to the melting beauty of Miro, but Monteverdi's audience knew that Poppea would not survive. Much has been said about this juxtaposition of the beauty of the music and this assortment of questionable characters. But Poppea is not unique in that, now is it? I mean, think about, I don't know, the sleepwalking scene in Verdi's Macbeth. But still, you know, do you feel, it's a question for all three of you, that tension between the characters in all their glory and this music? Or is it just part of delivering a performance and there's no thought about that while on stage?
Well, there's a particular moment in Miro. We share this. Yeah. And for me, it's like the wrapping around of the hands of the neck. It's sensual and it's sexual, but it's dangerous. And so I think I really value that juxtaposition in this music, that in the beauty, you actually can find some of the most dangerous, menacing intentions. And I think that actually reveals a lot, and it's not just given to you. You really have to look at it. And I always think about that when we're singing that phrase. That, you know, in our relationships, actually, how healthy is that to wrap yourself around another person and you squeeze the life out of each other?
I should translate that. In Miro heißt es ja Miro, godo, stringo, nodo. Also, dass ich dich nur sehen kann, dass ich dich dass ich mich an dir ergötzen kann, dass ich dich drücken kann. Kann man auch immer glauben, an mich drücken kann. Und dann purt an nodo. Nodo ist der Knoten, also dass ich dich umschlingen kann. I think it's a very good point, actually. And the dissonances that are quite sharp dissonances in the duet bring that out, I think, even further. Slávka, what about Poppea?
I mean, it was from the very beginning very interesting to me why the music is so beautiful when she's so cruel and she's so ambitious and, how do you call it, kaltblütig?
Cold-blooded.
Yeah. And there are many moments where Monteverdi really made her really sympathetic. For example, when she falls asleep, he is actually a mature woman and he makes her very, very sympathetic to the audience. And that point that her Arnalta, she brings her to sleep and it makes her very vulnerable, even though she is actually not. You know, there are so many points also, the relationship with Nerone, she's talking a lot about how she loves him, how she adores him, and how she's waiting for him to come back. And then the lover of hers, Ottone, he arrives and he says how she even said that she loves him and she doesn't really care. She's really like, she's loving him out. Monteverdi really tries to make her really good at some point, which she is terrible. So this was really for me, like how to sing such beautiful melody with a thought, what are you actually doing? Like she has a plan, she knows exactly what she wants, she's very smart about that, and she knows that she is gonna get it. Doesn't really matter how, what is it gonna cost. Also the thing that she just, really lightly tries to persuade him to kill Seneca, for example, which is the only moment where she like puts this out of her, like to tell him like do something so that I become empress, so that there is nothing anymore in our way. So it still is very difficult for me to put it together at some point. I
go back to what Kate said. I think there's this notion that which I find naive and simplistic, that it's either good or bad. And of course, almost everything in life and almost every person, including ourselves, if we're honest, is both. What I like about this opera, I was talking to Jan Lauwers about it, and we compared it to Monteverdi's most important contemporary, which I think was Shakespeare. And I think they're similar in that there is no explaining or justifying being good or bad. These characters just are that way, which I think makes it modern and not like a 50s movie, where the happy end has to be earned by moral quality. Now, all three of you have important careers in opera, in other repertoire. Kate, you will be appearing, for example, in Da Ponte Mozart operas here. Christina Bock, who is an ensemble member from next year, will be singing in Fledermaus, will be singing Octavian. Slávka Zámečníková, also an ensemble member, is singing, you were just in Carmen, and now it's this. To somebody new to Monteverdi's music, how would you, and somebody may be skeptical because it is so different, how would you explain to them what makes this so special for yourself?
I would say a way to describe this music is that it is sung theater. So if you like to go to the theater, then basically we are working in a way such that the lines are really meant to be directed to each other in a fashion of dialogue. And that means, as opposed to maybe your core operatic repertoire, Mozart, Puccini, Verdi, there's not this wave of orchestral music under you that's sort of carrying you along. We, as the performers, actors, we have to take on so much more of the impulse as to how the text is driven and how we relate to each other. Normally in the core repertoire also, I feel that the music underneath provides a subtext. It constantly provides a subtext for the singers on stage. It answers the call of your vocal question, and it comes back and forth. With this, we really have to direct and lead that. And it's a very different approach. But I think in that way, it's far closer to to theater, drama, you know, what do they call straight theater, I suppose.
Yeah, Sprechtheater.
Yeah, Sprechtheater, okay.
Christina, I spoke with Pablo also a moment ago, and he pointed out something that I also feel very strongly. It's like pop music or like rock music centuries before there was. But why do you think that is? I mean, is it the relative simplicity of the harmonies? Why do we have that feeling? It strikes us as something, he said, shockingly modern.
Yeah. It is, and it's actually so groovy. So I can see all of us always like grooving around. It's just you can't stop. You have to move in a way. And I mean, what you said, it's like really natural and it's really direct music. So I think there's not like a wall between the audience and us. And for me as a singer and in the character, it's just so liberating. It's such a freedom, and of course you have to take the responsibility to do something. It's not, you know, you don't have a maestro and he does something and you have to follow. It's really like a ping pong.
One more question I have is, of course, there was a notion, Slávka, maybe a question for you, that this music can be sung only by specialists and that the voices have to be different. I never subscribed to that. I think there's a difference between the vocal material. We're in a big opera house built for the late 19th century. And even big by today's standards, between the vocal material and the stylistic, the vocal production. So, but still, was it hard to get to the place to be able to produce this? Pablo is a specialist, and he didn't want a romanticized version of Monteverdi, like probably Karajan conducted here there are recordings, by the way, in 1963.
Don't listen. It will confuse us.
How hard was it? It's not just less vibrato, it's much more than that.
If you think about, this is where the opera began. I mean, this was beginning. People didn't really come through the romanticism yet. So they had to really start at some point. And if you even are not specialists, you also have to start at some point. And it's really nothing that bad as people think. Like now you have to sing straight tone. It's terrifying. And I have to say, this is my second Baroque opera. And I didn't even have a problem in the first one. It was in Berlin, Hippolyte Haris. And I never found it difficult because, I mean, this is kind of hygiene for the voice, exactly like Mozart. And you just have to feel it. What we were talking about before, like why it's Monteverdi's music so modern or liberating. For me, it was the piece where I felt I can give that much emotions that I never had before. I mean, in any other piece. It's actually so free. You can do whatever you want, whatever you feel like, and it's going to be right. I mean, you cannot do this in Shostakovich that much, for example. So this was it felt so good and so special to me to for the first time in my life to really like be there, like to create the role that's going to fit you in any case, because it's going to be you. It's like as if you would compose it at the moment. It's really like, this is the moment when I sang and when I said it for the first time. You should sing it like this always, of course. But I mean, I never found anything difficult about that. Maybe the low range. But other than that, nothing.
All right, ladies, thank you so much. I think the audience is in for a big surprise. Maybe not everybody who will come to these performances is familiar with this music. I think it's a real discovery, and it's about time that Wiener Staatsoper makes this discovery possible. So thank you. I'm looking forward to our opening night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wir verabschieden uns nun wieder mit dem Schluss des Werkes, mit dem Schluss der Poppea, also dem Duett Pur ti miro, das Sie gleich am Anfang gehört hatten, aber diesmal von der Bühne der Wiener Staatsoper und mit vollem Orchester. Dieses Werk ist für mich wie eine Zeitreise. Man spürt mit großer Wucht die Fremdheit einer weit, weit entfernten Welt und gleichzeitig durch die Musik, die keine zeitlichen Schranken kennt, ihre unmittelbare sinnliche Nähe. Und so landet man bei dieser Reise, und ich glaube, man sollte nur solche Zeitreisen antreten, mitten in unserer Gegenwart. Premiere ist am 22. Mai. Es gibt weitere Vorstellungen bis einschließlich dem 8. Juni. Ich würde mich sehr freuen, Sie an einem dieser Abende hier in der Wiener Staatsoper begrüßen zu können.